All right, so good evening. It's been a wonderful summer. Yes?
Yes, sir.
A little hot? It's been a long time since I've seen you all. So anyway, thank you for coming tonight. We wanted to do this evening for a number of reasons. Number one, I think there was a number of the folks in the community last year who said, hey, we'd like to find out more about the budget. And us trying to be as transparent as we can be, said, I think it was that point, it was September, so having a budget community workshop didn't make sense in September because we were going to have a hearing in a few days. So we said, why don't we set one for next year? And Benjamin remembers. Can you turn that down a bit, Alex? Like I can't even hear myself thinking here. Benjamin remembers I probably sent it to him, and we had it for August 14th as of September 1st last year. So I think this is a good time to do it. We've had an opportunity to talk about the budget workshop, which we did back in June 25th. Ordinarily, what happens after that, we receive in our final notice of appraised value, and I'll let Benjamin talk to you that in a few minutes. Then we go through, we set what's called our trim max, we submit that in, and then over the summertime, we then begin to refine our budget based on our council guidance, and then come forward in September, second Tuesday, fourth Tuesday, first hearing, second hearing, hopefully approval on the second hearing, and we have a budget for the execution of next fiscal year. So again, what we want to do is we want to give you an overview of our budget, what we presented on the 25th of June, but also overlaying the new information we got from the tax appraiser. I believe we went from 7.2 to 10.1, and how that impacts the budget and how it kind of works through our budget as a whole. So budget acts as four things. The first thing it's a policy document, right? It sets the policy for the vision, or for the village in the direction we want to go in our next year. Secondly, it's a strategy and operational document. And you'll see a good portion of what we do in the budget is strategy driven. You can't spend money without knowing what you're going to spend money on, so you better know what your strategy is. Thirdly, it's the financial portion, which Benjamin will go through. And fourthly, it's a communication document, right? This is I'll call it a book. It's now an online document that you're going to see, the budget this year. It's going to be completely online this year. There will actually be no paper budget, so we'll make sure you have access to that. So those are the four things that a budget acts for a village. So keep that in mind as we go through. Benjamin and I are going to walk through this. I'm trying to figure out when is the best time for questions. We're going to break this up. The first part is the strategy portion. Why don't we, at the end of that, I'll give that portion of it. We can stop and you can ask questions about strategy. Then I'm going to turn it over to Benjamin. He's going to talk through the finances of it, and then you can ask questions. And then the last part is the decision portion of it, which is the portion that we present to council, which ultimately what they choose to do in terms of the final budget and what that equates to for a trim, or for a millage. Is that good? Make sense? All right, I got something on my foot here. So who's got the slide there? Okay. That's everything I just told you there. So next slide. All right, so I kind of went through this before, and this kind of shows you the timeline of how we get to adopted budget, which is kicking off October 1st for the new fiscal year. It's not something that we just put together out of the blue. We go all the way back in March, and you see that area, that first thing, the orange part, the annual administration strategic session. So what we do is we put together all the information that we've received from the community, from surveys, from council directives, from last year's things that we've done, and begin to put together the strategy we want to focus on over the next 3 years. But particularly focusing very directly on the next fiscal year, which was in this case FY 24-25. We put together our strategy, then we go and bring it to the council in May, and we do the annual council strategy session where we present ours. They give us feedback, yes, no, a little bit left, a little bit right. We come back, we readjust it. Then we bring that back into, and I think many of you were there, our budget workshop this year was June 25th. The purpose of that is to give an overview to the council and the community of what we're trying to achieve next year, and set what's called a trim max or a millage cap. You can call it either one. And then most important is receive the guidance from the council to move forward to refine the budget going through the year. This thing in the stars right there, if you can't read it, that's community meeting. That's today. And I can't even read the next one. What does it say? Oh, I committed to give the council a copy of the budget on August 23rd, so that's my commitment to the budget, to the council. And this is the process here I talked about where we refine the budget. First budget hearing is, like I said before, September 10th. Second budget hearing is September 24th. And then as we move forward into October, we begin to kick off the new fiscal year. So that's the timeline. Next slide. The agenda, next slide. You know our organization. Again, this is important, just knowing who's who and what they do. We do happen to have a new Public Works Director. If you haven't met him, Chris Miranda. He came in on August 5th, so he's been on board now, I guess, 2 weeks. So please, if you want to get a chance to meet him, please reach out and we'll connect you up with him. But great guy, can do great things for us. We've kind of have a summary here. I quadded up our strategy just to make it really, really simple. Top left is our vision, our mission and values. Most importantly, and particularly how we focus on for the next fiscal year, are the 5 goals, delivery goals, and our 2 supporting goals. And you can see here, to have a safe and secure village, a thriving environment, community, and local marketplace, engage in active programs and public spaces, accessible, connected, and mobile transportation, and lastly, a resilient and sustainable environment and infrastructure. And then the 2 supporting goals, efficient and effective government services, and community communications and collaboration with our partners. So that's the framework that we use as we put together our strategy, and then of course the budget that supports it. Next slide. These are the highlights that we achieved over the last year. These are things just to make sure that people want to know that we have done quite a bit over the last few years, and take a look at what we've done. We're proud of it, but we want to of course do more in the coming years. Next slide. This was one of the years that we got feedback from the residents. Every 2 years, we do a biennial survey. And this one was particularly, for me, very telling. My first one was only 9 months into being the manager, but this one was now almost 3 years into the manager. And what it told us, the good news is pretty much what we already knew, so that reinforces the things that we need to get done. And that obviously helps us begin to develop our strategy and fund. So this is what you all told us. The biggest concerns in terms of importance and satisfaction was traffic conditions. Beach maintenance was kind of a wild card because when that was in there was a time we didn't have a beach, so I'm imagining it got higher than it normally would have. I think if we put out the survey today, it probably wouldn't be as high because I think it's much better than it was in January, February. Traffic enforcement, street lighting, planning and zoning and services, facilities for teens. You can read it. I don't need to read it for you. But how close do you guys think that is to what, generally speaking, what most of the folks in Key Biscayne are interested in? Up, down, close, nowhere near? So-so? Okay, so-so.
General maintenance isn't there.
Yeah, and that's always one of my top of my list. But one of the things that came out over here, this is our top capital efforts. So they ask a number of different questions. One was specifically what's most important and what's your satisfaction level is. Top capital, you can see them there. A lot of those are related to maintenance, Myra, what you talked about. And then some of the things that we took, some other interpretations out of analyzing it. Police presence, communications, our website, access to public education, you can see it. So that's a very small snapshot of what was a 97-page document. So take that for what it is. It's a single snapshot. Let's go to the next slide. We, of course, then we do our SWOT analysis. We identify what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, our threats, and I like to turn around threats and opportunities because I always like to leave opportunities at the end. This could literally be a 40-minute conversation, so we won't dive into this deeply, but please take a look at this if you have the chance, and if you think we don't have something right, please let us know. If you think we need to add something, it's also important. We do have a running list of SWOT issues, and obviously we couldn't put all 20 of them on each category. So what we try to do is we try to identify the top 7 for each one. So next slide. So what we did is we put together the strategy. We put together the feedback we got from the community. We did a SWOT analysis, and what we came up with are our top 10 focus areas for the next year. First one is alleviating traffic. Second one is maintaining safe streets. Ensuring community safety, you can read it right down the road. And Myra, you see right there, perform maintenance and repair, number 6 right there. And then it goes all the way down. So those are the 10 areas that we've identified that we need to focus our resources, and resources are not just money, it's also people and time and energy and effort and all those things that make something happen. So these are the 10 areas that I am developing my budget off of, and when I go finalize the budget, you will see what we're going to spend on each one of these, and I will try the best I can is to give you metrics on how we're achieving each one of these focus areas. So let's go to the next slide there. That's right, you've got it, right? So what I'm going to do, that's the strategy area right there. So I'm going to open up to any questions before I turn it over to Benjamin to go through the financial questions. Yes, Lucio. Yes, Lucio.
Okay, so the only reason I came here is to make sure that you keep in mind, early as it is in the budgeting process, that one of the most important things that we have going in the village of Key Biscayne is to properly maintain our stormwater and resilience infrastructure. Right now we have 40 plus gravity wells that, along with the outflows, take care of getting rid of our stormwater once it's gathered by our catch basins and our lines. More than half of those wells are not functioning the way that they should today because they are not 100% at optimum capacity. Even with that, we saw an incredible amount of rain in May and June of this year, more rain than I've ever seen in my 50-plus years of living in Key Biscayne. And our stormwater was gone within 2 to 3 hours of the really, really hard rain lopping off. In other words, once it stopped raining as hard as it was, the water receded almost immediately. Okay? It would do a lot better if we were functioning at 100% capacity. It is not today. And that is so important because the way that you've all got it set up in the Public Works, and I'm going to confirm that by speaking to our new Public Works Director, make sure he knows what I'm talking about. The wells are not cleaned until they're approximately 25% plugged up. That's ridiculous, because if the well is plugged up 1%, that means the water's not flowing into the aquifer. And therefore, it becomes...
Luch, I'd love to have this conversation about it because I agree with you, but this is kind of, can we keep it at the strategic level? Because
Finish that, I guess?
yeah, if you got one more, yeah, but yeah, go ahead and finish your thought process.
I'm just trying to make, we're about to embark on this crazy 500 million plus, project, which is absolutely, I'm not going to say the words that I'm thinking, but absolutely crazy, okay? To change a system that works perfectly well when it is properly maintained. And what I don't want is for that system not to be maintained in order to prove to us that we need to replace it.
Okay, so, no, good comment. So look, and obviously, you hit one of the key topics, reduce flooding is right there. Perform maintenance and repair. So look, that's a very big priority for me, of course, and you've known that since I've been here. But of course, when you look at infrastructure that was built in 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, it only has a certain shelf life.
The structure was built in 1990.
We have a couple things. We also have some built earlier. So, things last, and we'll continue to do maintenance on it. But infrastructure does have a life cycle, and we'll talk about that next week when we go into the stormwater workshop. But very important to us. Reduce flooding, perform maintenance and repair.
We have enough money
Very
in that
critical.
budget in order to make sure that all those wells
And-
and all
and-
those outflows are
And we have that-
properly
we-
maintained 100% of the time at optimum capacity.
And we have it fully funded for 100% maintenance next year.
And
Yes.
kudos to you because for the first time ever, it was properly maintained and it worked. So to echo Lucho's, please maintain, but thank you for figuring it out.
Well, I'm going to give the kudos to my public works directors because those are the guys that got it done. I say it needs to be done, they get it done. So, but yes, look, but infrastructure does have a life cycle. It doesn't last forever, right? So, at some point you do have to upgrade it. You got to upgrade it properly to meet the time period that you want. Different conversation. We're talking one-year
Different
budget.
conversation.
We're not talking long-term. Yes, sir.
About the timing, can you put back the timing?
Oh.
There. Is there any chance you can deliver the detailed budget before that? Because it's so close to the hearing that it really doesn't give us enough time to digest everything that you put in detail, in the details. You present that to the council, but you made it public really close to the hearing. Is
Well,
there any
we're
way
going to
we
make
can
it
advance that?
public either the 30th or the 4th. 30th of
September?
August or the 4th of September, yeah.
So that's
But you
6
give it
days
to the
before the
council
hearing.
on the 23rd,
Yes,
but that's a public record.
yes.
So why wouldn't you make it public?
We want to give them an opportunity to read it.
It's a public record.
Yes, it is.
Okay, that's fine.
Yes, it
We
is.
got it.
Let me add on the question about the detailed budget.
No, go ahead.
So
No, go
when
ahead.
we do,
Yes, it's a public record.
Okay, got it.
when we do the budget workshop in June, we present, obviously the PowerPoint has a summary of the information. The detail that leads up to that information is all available on the website at the same time in June. All the revenues, all the expenditure details is a public document and it's June, months before we do the budget. Now, obviously over the summer, we'll get into this, we fine tune it, but the meat and potatoes, probably 90% of the budget is there in detail available in June, months before the September hearings.
Not enough detail, to be honest, not enough detail to go line by line.
It has all the lines of revenue,
No, it doesn't have
all the lines
all
of
the details
expenditures.
that you have in the last version. So my point is there any way you can advance that? You start the process in March, that we have a, final budget by sometime early August, that we can digest, so in September we are prepared with, much better questions and proposals?
We'll be presiding that budget to the council on August 23rd.
Yeah, again, my question is, can we advance that so that the public can have it before?
And Ben, you and I spoke about this. The Miami Beach proposed budget has incredible level of detail that is very, very helpful. It makes things very clear. It's transparent. It answers a lot of questions and puts away a lot of doubt. So I know it's a lot more work, but I think that's what people would like to it be closer to, because it's a beautiful document.
Yeah.
And
no,
it was released July 1st.
There's no reason for us not to have it before.
So
yeah,
aspiration.
it is a great document. For you guys that don't know, I used to work for the city of Miami Beach, so I'm very familiar with it as well. The flip side of that, and knowing Key Biscayne, we're going to get into, we like to keep a low millage rate. We like to keep a lean staff and be very efficient. They have a huge budget department, and I'm not saying that as an excuse. Obviously, we've taken the budget from where it was, which was, I think, I looked 10 years ago, it's a 12-page document in Excel. We've now transitioned that to a full comprehensive book that tells the story about the mission, the values, the objectives, the metrics, has narratives on each department. We include the objectives of each department. What did that department achieve? What are the goals for the next year? And then the numbers that support that. So we've already transitioned to getting it closer to exactly where it tells the narrative and explains it. We're continuously improving on it, but we've already come a long way. I show you from now to then.
But the
this.
line item detail is just really helpful. The one in Miami Beach that I looked at, it just has granular detail.
Okay. All right. And I will tell you, the document that I think we put out maybe the day or two after the workshop, it's not that much different than what we're going to have on August 23rd. It really isn't. There's not that much different that's going to change. So we have to confirm a couple revenue sources and the exact amount, maybe tweak a few expenses, but we're pretty much there. Come once you saw on June 25th. And if you haven't seen the document, it's posted online, right? Where it has all the revenues and expenses on there. Yes.
Just conceptually, it's more strategic. When you, the manager, do you benchmark with other managers that you get together with, like the city of Palm Beach, or West Palm Beach, or Palm Beach, and talk about similar problems and similar budget issues? Is there other groups that you guys?
We do. So much is unique, particularly what Key Biscayne does. But yes, from a macro level, yes, we do. In fact, I'm going to a Florida League of Cities conference tomorrow where there will be sessions on budget. We'll be meeting with folks across the state. So there's opportunities to do that, yes. Yes, Betty?
I just wondered in your list of, I guess it's sort of like your goals, not this one, but the other, where you had your goals, I don't see anything on there about the causeway.
Yeah, you know, it's a subset to alleviate traffic.
It's,
There are a
Oh.
number of actions underneath this. And when we come out, there's,
because alleviate traffic is sort of general, because
Yeah, but the-
causeways are a big problem.
yeah, no, but so, again, without going into, you know, another 10 slides, and by the way, actually, we probably have it here, don't we? Yeah, you want to go forward? Jump to it. Go back. Oh,
It's
no,
just when we
hey,
see the Venetian getting all that money,
There we go. So here you
and
go.
we don't get anything.
So these are the areas right here. Those are the and they may have changed. This is the ones we had at June 25th. You know, we've done some tweaking to them, but these are the actions that support that focus area. And you can see.
So
right there.
what are you really doing to make something happen?
Well,
with our
we're
causeway?
in the middle of a master plan right now.
I know, but I'm talking about like Venetian Causeway got money from the federal government. Can we do that?
Well, Venetia Causeway started maybe 10 years ago. You know, they went through the initial assessment, and they brought in what's called a planning, development, and environmental study. That completed, I think, about 5 years ago. And only once when you get your PD&E done, do you then able to get federal funding.
But we've done none of that. Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, the village has done nothing because none of one of those are our assets.
I know, but we're certainly-
but the Bearcut Bridge,
Certainly affects us.
the Bearcut Bridge has a PD&E that's kicked off, a planning, development, and environmental study. There wouldn't be one done on Rickenbacker Causeway. That's not something you would do. You would do something on a Bearcut Bridge, which is the county is doing a master plan on Rickenbacker Causeway, and a
About
and a-
William Powell.
they've extended the PDE to cover all three bridges. Bearcut Bridge, William Powell, and West Bridge, all three of them.
So is Key Biscayne involved with that?
Yes. Yes, we are.
So in 10 years, we should be able to get the money?
A PD&E allows you to apply for a grant. Allows you to apply for a grant.
I just felt very left out when I heard they.
When you heard what?
I felt very left out.
What do you feel left out for?
Money.
Oh, well, the time, I mean, like Venetian didn't happen overnight. You go back and,
That's fine, you know, if I had an idea that maybe in a
Yeah.
certain amount of time, we actually would get
now
something
the
accomplished.
thing, and this is one of the issues, and I mean, we're kind of getting off, but just to kind of give you an idea, Venetian is a toll bridge.
We're a
which-
toll bridge.
No, hold on, let me finish it. It's a toll bridge which has a direct revenue source to the bridge itself. Rickenbacker Causeway is a toll roadway. Difference, right? Because the bridge is one thing, although it's the same road, you know, there are people who very interesting to come in and take over that bridge, buy it, and build a new one.
So that's why we're not getting money for it.
But guess what? They're going to charge us a big toll to do it. So, you know, always be careful what you ask for, because if someone wants to come in and build a $200 million bridge,
They've tried.
we're going to have to pay for it, because guess what? We're the ones that cross the bridge every single day. So,
But they've been trying to circumvent the
PD&E?
PD&E because they've been trying to get private vendors to.
Well, they can do it if they get private investors. They still have to do somewhat of a NEPA study. It's not a full PD&E, though.
But they have not taken, in my opinion, and I was around about 12, 14 years ago.
Mhm.
They have deliberately kicked the can down the road, hoping for different concepts and development.
But there are always people out there who are looking to buy that bridge. Look, we came here because I want to make sure that Benjamin has an opportunity to talk through his budget. You guys got an opportunity to talk to me all the time. So let's turn it over to him to go through the budget.
All right, so now we'll jump into some actual numbers. And we'll start here with the revenue projections. But I think it's important to let everyone know that when we start this budgeting process, and you saw that long timeline, we actually start on the expenditure side. When we go through these presentations, the process is that Steve and I have every department director come into the office and justify. We go through every line item on their budget. So when we start working on the budgets to match up with our goals, we don't even know what our property values are come June or July. This happens way before that. So we will present revenues first, however, know that in an actual process of creating the budget, we start expenditures. We start from zero and build up. So here's kind of a summarized, obviously we know our biggest revenue source is from ad valorem revenues, and I like to always show the history to see where we came from, where we are today. As Steve mentioned, the property appraiser mentioned that our taxable value at just a shade under $11 billion, and that's a 10.1% increase from the prior year. One of the interesting things, and I track this, is when we got that number in June, it was only 7.2. To see a jump from 7.2 to 10.1 is a significant increase. I look back 20 years, and generally that number stays within about 1%. So to see a 3% jump was something that we couldn't have imagined to happen, and it's been bigger in the last few years as we see these kind of wild real estate rides. When I talked to the property appraiser's office, they mentioned some big fourth quarter purchases that hadn't quite factored in yet. So it was a pretty significant increase, but we're not that far away from when I started here. We had 3 straight years of declining taxable value. So it's interesting to see coming out of the pandemic, 21, 22 was about 1%, and then now for the last 3, we've had these significant, almost double-digit increases. The next biggest area is state revenue share. These are sales use taxes, where we get a portion of sales tax from the state. We're expecting that to stay strong into the next year. Charges for services, we obviously, this building here, community center, we charge services to become members of the community center, to do some of the activities, the sports, et cetera. All that fills into the revenues of our budget, and we've been looking really closely to right-sizing those revenues. We know we spend a significant amount, for instance, in our athletic fields. Now, who impacts these athletic fields? What sports programs, whether it be soccer or rugby, et cetera, are we charging enough for those services? And you gotta be careful when you look at this, because yes, it might cost a lot, and we might want to charge them more, but you got to look, and I think you mentioned, do we look and benchmark against other cities? We don't want to be the only one charging, $2,000 for a soccer fee. No, we want our children in Key Biscayne to be able to participate. So you got to be careful when we kind of right-size these revenues and look at what's your expenditures, but also look at the market, right? We got to see what's a fair rate to charge as well, and how much we subsidize through taxpayer dollars as well. And then the last one is interest income. This has been something new. And looking back at the history of the village, we had very little interest income, only because rates were so low. Now that rates are much higher, the village is earning 5.5% on the cash we have in the bank, on our reserves. And I say it's our investment income, but when you think of investments, sometimes you think of the stock market or exotic investments. Because it's our public funds, we have to pick just very liquid, safe assets. So we're talking about just money market accounts where we earn 5.5% interest. So that generates on our reserves a lot of interest, which helps keep our taxes down.
Before you jump, so look, you guys can see this number, and this is that's 30% over the last 3 years, and we clearly recognize that, and we want to make sure that as we go forward, but while still trying to achieve our objectives, we also take in consideration that's a big jump, right? Without us even doing anything with the millage, that's a big jump, right? You'll see later, between when both Benjamin and I have been here, we've reduced the millage each year, and we hope we can continue that trend, because we know that's been a big bite, right?
So that was a summary. Here's how it actually looks in the budget with each of the line items in our revenue. So obviously ad valorem is our biggest one. That $32.6 million, just want to clarify that that's, if we keep our millage rate steady from last year with the new values, that's the revenue it would generate. And we'll get into the slides later, which is more revenue than I think Steve and I think that we need. So we're looking at obviously decreasing that millage rate to be able to operate. Utility services taxes, that's on your electric, your water. There's taxes that come to the village. Communication services taxes is on cable TV. Interesting trend there. We saw it actually declining. I don't know if you guys seen the news of everyone's cutting the cord, cutting cable, going to streaming services. We saw it declining. In the last few years, it's kind of picked back up. So I'm kind of monitoring to see how that's going and looking at activity with families. Franchise fees on electric services, we used to get from the county, now directly from FPL at a higher rate. I mentioned charges for services. That's for mostly our community center to participate in activities. License and permits, intergovernmental is sales tax that we get from the state. It's also a share of fire and police or certain pension funds we get from the state as well. The interest income, there you can see here, 2021, $37,000 of interest. Next year, proposing $1.25 million of interest. So we've obviously seen that take off. Then below is where we have other revenues, non-operational. Most of this are federal, state, local grants. The reason we don't include that in the budget is because you never want to count a grant before it's certain. We have to look and take a conservative approach to this, because you might apply for the grant, you might think you're going to win it, and as we've seen in our experience, having applied for a lot of different grants, you don't always win it. And the reality is, especially being Key Biscayne, there's certain factors as to why Key Biscayne is not going to be prioritized in that list for grants. So we're being extremely aggressive in our applying, but also being very strategic and saying, we're not going to waste resources in applying if it's something that we don't think we can actually win. There's no use in wasting staff time, grant writing time, et cetera, when you don't have a high probability of winning it.
So,
A lot of the taxes has a way of calculating with around 95%, right?
Correct. So actually,
95%
the
margin
state has a law where you can't budget less than 95%. And I can get into the reason for that is because if you all know, and I want you to all be aware of this because you all will get a tax bill very soon in November. If you pay your tax bill by the end of November, you receive a 4% discount. So the reality is, if all Key Biscayneers paid in November, and I track this, about 80% of them do, that's already 4% less. So if we budgeted at 100%, we'd obviously be short. The other 1% is there's a process what's called going to the Value Adjustment Board when you petition your values. And generally we lose about 1% of value to that adjustment board. So between the 4% discount and the 1% that you lose at the adjustment board, that's where it gets into the why you budget at 95%.
I wanted to follow up on what Benjamin mentioned here for charges for service, and that is, sports. That is the community center. Those are the things that are directly usable by a single individual or group of people, right? And so, we've got a philosophy about, taxes for the whole or taxes for the people who use it, right? And so we're really trying to come up with the right mix of that. We fully recognize that the people who use our fields are the soccer program and the rugby program, like you said. We now have a 10 to 15% surcharge, 10 now, 15 next year, right? On top of what they charge that comes back to us to maintain their fields. Because unfortunately what happens is these folks play on the fields, great, we love it, right? But then we're left with a torn up field. And then we got to pay for it. And so now we're now asking them to pay us more. It's not going to pay for all of it. That's okay. I think people across the community are willing to pay for some of it, but I don't think they want to pay for all of it. So we're trying to right size this. One of the things that we're working with coming into this new fiscal year is looking at the community center and the athletics program as business centers, right? So let's figure out how we look at it from a revenue and expense perspective, and then let's make a decision as to how much we want to subsidize it and how much we don't want to subsidize it. So what you're going to see us coming out with that and analyzing it this year, and then in next year's budget, we'll put together those two portions of the budget as a business center. Yes?
Just to add to that, that was the reason also why we limited the enrollment of out of Key Biscayne residents, because we know we highly subsidize the sports through the field, and if someone is not a taxpayer here, they're getting a windfall. And
Yeah.
that's something that probably.
Well, there is a surcharge. What's the surcharge on out of?
Yeah, I think it's 20 for a non-resident over
Yeah,
the resident
okay.
fee, but based on the
Yeah.
impact, it's.
Well, it also comes down to we just have too many people on the fields too, right?
Well,
I mean,
and
that's
we
part of it.
have enough of a demand where it's
Our-
not
ourself,
to be
right.
snobs, but we just don't have the capacity.
We 3,962 kids under 18. We got a lot of them. Yes, ma'am.
Are there charges for the off-island clubs that come out here and use the fields? Or they're just showing up?
When you say the off-island clubs,
When I'm out, like on Sunday morning, sometimes I see all these people that are clearly not from the key, some kind of clubs that come out and they play soccer, I guess they're pickup games, I don't know, but they're big
Yeah.
groups.
well, we do have adult programs. I don't know exactly what you're talking. We do have adult programs where adults play, and a lot of them are on the weekends. I mean, I don't know. I have to be more detailed, but there are some groups that are less formal than what you're seeing going on with the kids' soccers. I'd have to see exactly, and if you want to share with me afterwards what they are. But,
How many kids? That was pretty good for the non-numbers guy. What was the number?
What?
How many kids?
3,962.
3,100, in which, is that 900?
No, 18,
Okay.
18 and below in Key Biscayne.
In all sports?
Well, as of the 2022 census.
No,
that's-
just
that's-
kids
that's
in
not-
general.
Residents.
Yeah, resident children. So, we got a lot of them.
The community center programs for some sports, how is the compensation calculated for the ones running the program?
Yeah, so they go through an RFP process to be able to run the program. For instance, we just did one for soccer. So we had about 5 companies bid on providing the
No,
soccer
that I
services.
know. I was mentioning the ones that are run here, like swimming or.
That's the 70-30, folks.
Yeah, so most of the ones that run in the community center, there's a 70-30 split where the vendor gets 70% of the proceeds and the village gets 30% for offering, obviously, the facility.
So the person gets 70 and we get 30%?
Yep.
And there's no cap for the person?
No, I mean, obviously, the more people they bring in, it's mutually beneficial for them and obviously for the village.
And it's got to fit in the room, too.
Like swimming, for example, the more kids that come, there is no cap. The teacher can make.
I mean, there's a limit only because the size, I'm sure the program for the size of the pool and what they're going to actually have enough coaches and coaches per kid, but
Yeah.
no, there's no cap.
I think we should
Yeah.
consider putting a cap.
No, I think they probably do, based on the program. You know, each program, based on the size of the facility they got to operate in. I mean, you couldn't have 200 kids.
Some have caps and some have
Yep.
very loose caps. Like,
Yeah.
for example,
I've been checking
field
some of
hockey
them.
has a cap of 200.
I've been checking some of the payments for them, and some of them sound really high for running a 4-hour program every afternoon, Monday to Friday.
Okay.
I
We'll take a
would
look at
like
it.
to have that program for me.
Okay.
Well, we do. So 30, if it's a really high number for their 70, our 30% is obviously we
Yeah,
benefit
but
as well.
For the one organizing the program is 70%, and it's making $400,000 a year, working Monday to Friday, 4 hours a day.
In a
Very
subsidized,
interesting.
in a
It's good gigs.
subsidized facility, where we also subsidize, and we have 4,000 kids.
So the salary's 400,000?
Yeah.
His percentage of the business he's creating is high, it's 70%, and so the more kids that come to swim, the more.
It's a swimming program, gets a lot of revenues.
But that pays for all the instructors.
It's only 3.
Anyway.
4 hours a day,
Good job.
at the most.
Here, I kind of alluded to grants and reimbursements, because this is something I think since Steve came on as manager, we've really been aggressively pursuing and pretty successful in achieving as well. So this is federal, state, local, appropriations, reimbursements. So there's 4 categories: newly awarded, active, working to close out, and closed. So you'll see this hit the budget only when they happen. We'd obviously, I said we take a conservative approach and don't count chickens before they hatch. But here kind of shows you the success of what we've been able to do. Steve, you want to talk on anyone specifically? Or?
No, I mean, obviously, you know, we're looking at doing some significant infrastructure, and, you know, this is not something that, you know, that we can afford by ourselves, right? So, you know, by going out and doing matching money, as we've done very successfully, up to $26 million in grants over the last 3 years, we make sure that we leverage our money with whether it's federal, state, or whomever else is willing to give us money. So, you know, we'll continue to go after this. Things are probably, as you can imagine, those programs are dying out a little bit. I shouldn't say dying, waning a little bit, reducing, but that doesn't mean we're not going to continue to do it. There are programs in the state that are actually going up. The Resilient Florida program has gone from $100 million a year to $200 million a year. Unfortunately, whether you're a gambler or not, but it's on the backs of the Seminole tribes, and all the revenues they're going to bring on for sports gambling, but that's where we're going to, that additional $100 million is coming from. So some programs are going up, some are going down, but we're going to continue to be just as aggressive going after these grants.
All right, here's a status of the village's debt. If you guys know, in our ordinance, there's a very peculiar to Key Biscayne rule, which is that we have a debt capacity, which means no more than 1% of our taxable value. So in the earlier slide I shared, our taxable value was just under $11 billion. So 1% of that is about 10.7. That's an old number, it's about 10.9. So we could have $109 million of debt capacity. Then we compare that to what do we have outstanding right now? We have a total of $7 million outstanding. So the bottom number is what's still available, and that's just about $100 million of debt available. So when we talk about what the village has in its toolbox, we can issue up to $100 million of debt. Obviously, we haven't gotten anywhere near that capacity in the last few years, because it's only going to be obviously when the time is right, projects are ready to go. The other thing I want to point out is that middle column, the current interest rate of all of our existing debt. That's not a typo. That's 1.23% on the majority of our debt, and the highest debt we have on a fire engine purchased 3 years ago is about 1 3/4. So we will pay those off as slow as possible, because I mentioned earlier we're earning 5.5% interest on our reserves, and all of our debt outstanding, which is about $7 million, is less than 2%.
This is something that Benjamin, yeah, we'll get to, we got a slide there. This is something Benjamin is very proud of. He hit the market at the right time. Don't try to time the market, but he did. And right before they started going up, he got these interest rates for him. So we appreciate all the work that he did to get these at the right place.
Yes.
On the previous chart, sorry, does that include loans or is it just grants?
Now, these are all grants.
These are just pure grants?
Yeah, these are not the state revolving fund or anything like that, no.
Paying 11%.
You paid 11%?
Yeah, for a commercial loan
Wow,
at this stage, as for you applying.
wow.
It's a lot, Mike.
You need Benjamin, man.
That's a lot, Mike.
You need Benjamin.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that we only get a percent of grants that we apply for. Is there enough, do you have an average for that?
We do. I don't know what it is offhand, but I actually, Colleen Blank, she's our grants manager, and we actually do a return on investment of our grants, so we have that. And if that's something you want, send me a note and I can share that with you. We are very successful in getting grants. You never get all the grants you want, but
Okay, well, you mentioned you tend to cherry pick the grants based on probability. Okay.
you do, yeah. I mean, obviously, you go after the ones you're most likely going to get. You know, it's because the way we also calculate the return on investment is the time and effort we spend. Right, so we calculate the time that we spend to go after it, and if we're, you know, like some of the federal grants, they're just really, really, really hard. You can spend a lot of time going back and forth, and you beg the question, I'm doing this for this small amount of money, so maybe it's not as valuable. That's why we calculate a return on investment. Send me a note, Charles, I can share that with you.
Yeah, I think lessons learned. You know, when I initially got here, obviously grants, grants, grants. I'm always trying to go after other money than our own residents' money with millage. Then we found ourselves for, I remember a $25,000 grant, the amount of reporting, quarterly reporting, monthly reporting, we were using all our staff time. And while yes, I want to get that $25,000, and yes, I want to show to the residents that we received it, it just wasn't penny wise, pound foolish. So
So
now
that's why
we're
we
being
came
more
up with that
strategic.
return on investment process and calculating whether it's a valuable grant to go after.
All right, a lot of the discussion is going to be on the general fund, because that's obviously what sets our millage rate, but we do have these 5 other funds that I want to highlight and talk about their balances, what goes into them, what expenditures come out of them. So the first one is our Transportation Special Revenue Fund, and what comes into the Transportation Fund are local options gas taxes. That's every time you fill up at the pump, there's a certain amount of cents per gallon that come to the village. And the bigger one is the Transportation Surtax. This is the 0.5% sales tax. So if you guys know, when you buy any goods at the store, there's a 6% Florida sales tax, and there's that extra
Maybe I'll repeat
1%.
it.
That 1% is actually split, 0.5% to our hospital system, 0.5% for transportation. So we get a portion of that back from the county based on our population compared to the county population. So the interesting thing that happened right outside of the 2020 census after the pandemic was the Key Biscayne population actually went up significantly, and the county population had actually decreased at 2020. So our share of that surtax actually went up. We now receive about $900,000 of transportation surtax, which we then use to fund all those freebie vehicles that you see. On top of that, we leveraged some of that money to receive a grant from Florida Department of Transportation, FDOT, and that's why we now have 9 freebies. So 3 of those freebies we only pay 50% for because FDOT's paying the other 50%. So none of the 9 freebies cost any taxpayer dollars because we're using CITT money and an FDOT grant. So we've increased this fleet from 5, and now we've got 9 operating. The second one is the Parks Rec Open Space Land Trust. The land trust balance now is about $4.5 million. By the end of this fiscal year, which is, we only have about 7 weeks left, we're going to be about, well, we're going to actually just eclipse $5 million. And what that fund's used for is to acquire land. The most recent purchase being about 3 years ago on those 2 Harbor Drive properties. We paid about $2 million each. That fund got depleted, but in the last 4 years, we've been able to increase it. It gets 1% of the ad valorem, and also it receives a significant amount of interest income. So the 2 are about equal now. So it's growing at about $500,000 a year now. So it's growing pretty quickly. Unfortunately, the properties that we want to acquire are also growing quickly.
They're going up by a higher percentage.
But we'll be patient and see if that keeps growing. The third one is a building special revenue fund. This used to be part of our general fund, but we took it out because really a building fund, if you look at the Florida code, you look at the state statutes, your building department permit fees, you should only charge what it costs to carry out the Florida Uniform Building Code. So this is something we monitor every year because there's very strict state statutes that say you can only have a certain amount of reserves up to the last 4 years average. So we're constantly looking at where the balance is, what was our last year's averages. This is also the hardest one to budget for because you see super big waves up and down in your building department. When the pandemic hit, we got $0 in for about 3 months. Then you usually see during, if there's unfortunately a storm activity, you see zero revenue. But then after a storm, you pick up when everyone's trying to get permitted to do all their improvements. So it's a super volatile fund, which is why we keep a close eye on it, why we pulled it out of the general fund so that we could be very transparent to you guys as well to see exactly what we're looking at. You're seeing it every year as well. What are the revenues for the permits? What does it cost to carry out the Florida Uniform
And
Building
one of the
Code?
things, if I could add on there too, we've been waiting, and we know it's coming, when the condominiums begin to do their repairs after their, for the certification requirements. That's going to bring in quite a bit of revenue. And Benjamin, remind me, what percent over our annual intake would we then have to return to our customers?
So you would actually then lower the permitting schedule. That's what we look at every year to see, do we need to drop the fees
Yep.
based on where that 4-year average is? Yes.
So it can't be above what percent? What was it?
So it's the average of the last 4 years of expenditures.
Okay. So if it goes higher than that, then we have to bring down our building fees.
The revenues that are collected by the magistrates for citations and building violations go into that fund?
I think the ones associated with building, yes, but if it's a code violation that's non-building
It
related.
goes back
it's
in the general fund.
Okay, then the last two are called enterprise funds, and the fact that they run like a business. And that's your stormwater enterprise fund, and the revenue source is stormwater utility fees, and obviously the expenditures are the operations and maintenance of the stormwater system. I know Lucho left, he wasn't kidding that the only thing he cared about was that
I guess he did.
the
He took
stormwater
off.
system, but we make sure there's enough funds in there by the stormwater
We can be
fee
talking about it right here.
to be able to maintain that stormwater system, to be able to do the cleaning of the
Alright.
catch basins, et
We got
cetera.
the money
So-
for maintenance.
So he left before he could hear the good news that there was enough money for maintenance and
I'll put it on his chat.
Okay.
Put it on this test.
We're projecting $2.971 million for maintenance in the coming year.
the good news on these last two is we are holding the rate steady on both stormwater, and the last one here is solid waste, where for the single family and the duplexes on Fernwood that have municipal solid waste and recycling services, even though our vendor came back to us and said, hey, I've got to pay my garbage collectors more, my tipping fees are more, because we've done a good job of collecting some past due fees because of the interest income, et cetera, we're able to hold that rate steady even though the village's costs actually increase. So we are very sensitive to what Steve mentioned earlier, what the residents are paying on their tax bill. And not just the tax bill, but your stormwater fees, your solid waste fees. We know these are all fees, all money out of your pocket, so we do look at these closely, and anytime we can keep them steady or declining, we try our best to do so. So these are things that we obviously think about. Okay, reserves. I heard a question earlier, so here you go. At the end of 23, our general reserves were shade over 23 million, and we hold $4 million in our emergency reserves. So our policy is to strive to have a 40% of operating budget and 10% for emergency reserves in the operating budget. And the reason for that, and we want to include all 6 of these because this list keeps kind of growing every year we talk, because at first I think we started with 4 bullet points, and then we realized that bullet point number 5, serve as an advanced investment for critical capital projects and matching funds. When our beach washed away in a windstorm and we lost all the sand, we had a very tight deadline to get into a grant to get funding for that nourishment. So if we didn't have adequate reserves that we were able to spend first on and apply for that grant, we would have never received it.
So we're in a process now, and actually going back, and it's a normal process annually with Florida Department of Environmental Protection, is to get refunded for that. But if we didn't have the money at the time, we couldn't have done it. But now there's a process we can get our money back.
I have a question on this.
That's why we did it.
So you got $7 million
Nimble.
you
Yes.
used on the bond, right? So we owe $7 million, correct? Will we actually have 23 million in the bank? So in that, we could pay off that 7 and we have positive balance, correct?
We have a positive balance even with the 7.
That's what I'm at. Well, of course, if you have more money than the 7, you have a positive balance. The question I'm asking, you got 23 here and you have 7. Is that the net difference then? From the bond, you have the bond debt.
So the bond debt was, bonds that have been issued years ago.
I got,
Yes.
not that long ago, the $100 million bond?
$0 have been issued of the $100 million bond referendum.
You showed 7 million.
All the debt that's
Those
here.
are different bond difference.
So my simple question.
None of this is the general
my simple
obligation.
question, all the debt on the bonds,
Yep.
all the cash we got in the bank. You balance them out. What's the net number we have? What do we owe or what do we have as positive? Based on these slides.
Okay, so we owe the 7, and I'll be clear, we owe the 7 at 1%. And what we have is about 23 million, which is getting 5.5%, yes.
The interest rate's not the issue as much as, I got 23 million in the bank, I was 7, right?
16.
Total picture, correct? Of debt and assets.
Well, look, remember, we're doing a budget here. There is something that we do, remind me what it's called, the ACFR? What's it
Yeah, the
called?
comprehensive
Yeah, so
financial.
the comprehensive financial plan has all of our balance statements, all of our income statements. If you'd like a copy of it, we'd be happy to share it with you.
I have a
Yeah.
real simple question.
Yeah.
What's that net balance after comprehensive budget? Net
But
balance.
remember, we're talking about a budget here, Francis, so this is a budget, but we'd be happy to share with you our financial documents, which will tell you.
I thought that's what a budget was, Jay.
No, a budget is what you're going to spend in the coming year, and where the revenues are coming and where the expenses are going to go. But we do have financial documents that back up our standing.
Some of us are mentally challenged. You go ahead.
Excuse me?
I said some of us are mentally challenged. We came to school on a short little yellow
Okay.
bus.
Well, I'll be happy to share the ACFR with you, which is our financial documents. And if you can read them, good luck on you, because I can't read them. That's why I got Benjamin.
The $7 million that decreased the
Yeah.
general reserve from fiscal 23 to now. I understand the council approved $3 million to use in the couple of things, the San Agnes field and the theater. So where are the other 4 million?
So yeah, correct. So everyone's aware of what happened. When we came back, we had about a $6.4 million surplus for fiscal year 2023. So we went to the council, I believe it was in March, April, for 2 readings of the ordinance, and we listed a bunch of projects, for priority projects, to say, what can we do with the surplus? So the direction was we spent about $3 million on those projects, and the directive was the additional amount to be used against future stormwater projects.
Yep.
So there's gonna be used against, when we show the capital plan, it's gonna be used for stormwater projects, the additional amount.
So you use 7 million from the surplus.
Correct.
So you're not using the money from the balance, from the general reserve. So how do you go from 23 to 17?
Because at the end of the year, we had the $6 million surplus. If you take 23.3 and you take out the 6,
Yeah, so you had 23 at the beginning of the year. You
At the
added-
end of the year,
you-
at the end of the year.
End of the year, and then you added 6 million from the surplus, so that's 29. How you get to 17?
no, it came out of the 23, not adding to the 23.
That
out of the
6.2 million was a portion of that.
Yeah, but still, the math doesn't, I don't get the numbers, I'm sorry.
Because you're,
We had 23 million.
Yep.
We got 6 million from surplus.
part of the 23 was,
Hold on.
the 6.
That's 30 million, almost 30 million.
no,
No.
Spend,
6.2 is a subset of the 23.6.
no, because that was at the beginning of the year.
That was the end of the year.
No, the beginning of fiscal 24. This is end of fiscal 23.
The end of the year.
Beginning of 24, you had $23 million.
But remember, you close your books at the end of a fiscal year.
Yeah, and then you added $6 million surplus.
Because that $6 million was inside of that $23.3 million.
That doesn't make sense, because you got the surplus after, not before.
You didn't know that you're gonna get a surplus, that's what he's trying to say. Why, if you didn't know that you were gonna get a surplus, you were already including that number in the general reserve? I think that's what he's trying to say.
So the
So
23,
you come up with a number that should have not included the surplus because you didn't know how much you were gonna get, is that right? Okay.
so we closed our books at the end of fiscal year 23. That year had that surplus.
Okay.
That contributed to the end of your balance being 23.3. It's included as part of that number.
You didn't close your books on September 30th. You waited to do, so you kind of,
When our audit is done, it's in March.
so it was, okay.
Then,
So what you go is you retroactively set your budget as of September 30th, And then the difference between that is we recognize there was $6.2 million.
So it's really an adjusted closing of the books.
I think the issue is you're adding it to. It's part of the 23.3. If you take it out, that's why you end up with the 16.9. Okay. So other justifications, obviously having strong reserves, and we recognize these are higher than what the GFOA averages are. One of the reasons we do that is we recognize we are a barrier island here. We do have significant threats that could hit us. We feel comfortable having that money in the bank to be able to act quick if the storm does hit. Obviously, we know there was a referendum for this $100 million bond issue. When the time comes to borrow on that money, we want to ensure we're borrowing at the lowest rates possible. Now, are we going to get those 1.2% interest rates? Probably not. But whenever that time comes, I want to make sure we are AAA rated by S&P and Moody's, so we're able to borrow for as low as possible. And in the meantime, now that we have these high interest rates, obviously all this money is being invested and we are earning interest on those balances.
Benjamin, are you expecting another surplus this year?
Expecting what?
Another surplus.
Are you expecting another surplus this year?
It's, even though we're in September, it's hard to say right now. We're still, even though we end our fiscal year September 30th, we still get invoiced in October, November, December, which is why there's a process to issue your financial report and get audited by March. I would expect yes. I know your next question is going to say how much, and it's still too early to know exactly what it's going to be. But I will tell you with certainty that once our audit is done in March, we will come to council, present the ACFR, we'll come with that number, and the same discussion will be had. What do we want to do with the surplus? Are there certain projects we want to identify that we want to spend it on? Do we want to put it in reserves? Do we want to put it against stormwater projects? So it'll be a transparent process with 2 ordinance readings once we know final audited. And I wait until the audit is done so we know the final number. Okay, now shifting from revenues, did you have a question? Sorry. No, okay. Shifting from revenues to expenditures. Sorry.
Why do you choose 40% of operating budget? Is that something that the state recommends, a benchmark? Why
So
is
I
it
think the
40%?
40 plus a 10 gave us 6, we thought of it in terms of months, right? So 12 months of the year at 50, we got 6 months we could operate this place if a bad event were to happen. We looked at where other cities had it. We looked at the GFOA, which is the Government Finance Officers Association, kind of the best practices number, and they were about 2 to 3 months. We just felt more comfortable being a barrier island, and we know the significant threats that we have. We felt comfortable being higher, and we went back and forth and trying to right size it. And it's a target. It doesn't have to be exact, but that's kind of where
Before you go, Mario, let me add to that too, so that it's important that you know this. So, we went very soon after when Sanibel got hit during, was it Hurricane Ian? I think it was, yeah. So we went out there and visited them, and obviously, most of us are going out there from an infrastructure perspective. What are you going to do to rebuild? How you doing this? How'd you get on? What, et cetera. One of the critical things the city manager told me is make sure you have a financial situation that you are able to move through an emergency like this. For a couple of reasons. One, you need the money. Number 2, you need the money so people loan you money, right? People don't want to loan people money if you don't have money, ironically, right? So, there are a lot of people who came out of that hurricane were paying 10, 15% on money. They were, because they had good reserves, able to spend 3, 4, 5% on money. Unfortunately, he had to let his parks department go. He had to make those decisions. Sometimes that happens. But his biggest thing to me about all the infrastructure stuff, don't worry about it. You got Public Works, you got FEMA, you got FPL. They all come in, they'll make it happen. A little more serious than that. But he said, as a city manager, make sure you have the money that you can impact and make an impact when you get hit by a hurricane. So if that is the big reason, there's also investment reasons. I know Betty asked before, hey, what happens if we want to be a part of taking over the bridge, the Bear Cut Bridge? We got money right there for you, Betty. We can jump in with someone and we can be a partner and we can put it on the table and we can make decisions. I'm joking to a degree, but at the same time, it gives us that financial flexibility where when we want to make a decision, we can actually jump into an agreement substantially. Nobody wants to come to an agreement unless someone's bringing money. And so that gives us the opportunity to be able to bring money to the
The other thing, a lot of these grants we've been successful in being awarded is that a lot of them are reimbursement based. So you have to put your own money up front in order to get that money. So I noticed as we're applying for more and more and more and more, I needed more cash on hand, even though I knew I would get reimbursed at the end. We've got to have that money on hand to start it so we can get reimbursed. So I would not want to give up the opportunity of a 50% reimbursement, free money, by not having enough cash on hand to be able to front it.
But you also have the surpluses because of, I mean, this historically, we have been accruing surpluses, and we've had about 40% for a long time. So it's something that was existing. It was a policy that was implemented a little bit after the fact.
Well, we're
It's
running about, we're running about
good,
30,
it's
we're running about
sound,
30%, yeah.
But we've had,
Well, I don't think it was an unwritten policy. I think we wanted to establish it, and we wanted to justify it, because all the questions you're asking for, is, well, why are we carrying this kind of money? And we came, go back. Why?
but it happened a little bit, some of it happened a little bit by accident.
Oh,
That
no,
was-
no, no, yeah, without a doubt. No, I agree. But all of a sudden, we began to realize, why are we carrying this money? And we realized the benefits of carrying this kind of money are right here. You know, it puts us in a very good financial situation to be able to achieve those
AAA
goals.
rating.
Yeah, yeah,
I think,
exactly.
I think too, you know, we had that $6 million surplus, and says, man, you're a pretty lousy budgeter if you got it that inaccurate. And the reality was, and you're shaking your head, you probably think so.
I definitely think so.
So then I said, well, why? Why did it come back $6 million? And the reality was, on the expenditure side, our expenditure line items were within 5%. It was really a revenue issue. We came out of the pandemic, I didn't know the sales tax and economic activity would bounce back as fast as it did. I didn't know interest income, the rates would skyrocket as fast as they did. So I'd always budget in the earlier year conservatively, and the economic activity was always better than I thought. So and we got more grants than we anticipated. So in reality, most of that $6 million was a good problem. It was a revenue problem, not that we were so wildly inaccurate on the expenditures that we didn't know how to budget. So it was a good $6 million, but you got to dive deeper and say why. What was the cause of that? And it ended up being the revenues.
Benjamin, we had surpluses for the last 8 years. So that means we are getting money that we are not using. We also have carryovers, not only surpluses. So it's a lot of money that is not used, collected and not used. And for this gentleman, it's 11% cost. For me, it's 8%, and you are getting 5%. So we are losing money. Residents are losing money when you have more reserves and more carryovers. So after 8 years of surpluses, I think we should reconsider the amount of reserves and how we calculate the revenue. Because clearly we are missing something. We are having 8 years of surpluses.
So we talk about surplus, and we look at other cities as well. Most every city ends up having a surplus. Now, how much of a surplus? You know, if I come back with a surplus of $100, I should get a prize, right, to be that accurate. Now, if we're talking about $6 million, then obviously we're wildly inaccurate, and we got to say, why did that happen? So it's general that, yes, as a budgeting best practices, you budget conservatively. You don't want to be in the year where you can't pay certain expenditures, and especially in Key Biscayne, mind you, where we have rules that we have to go twice for an ordinance for a budget ordinance and able to spend money. Other cities can probably do it more quickly. So yes, as a practice, we budget conservatively. We don't count grants before we get them. On the expenditure side, we have our contract values. That's how we budget certain expenditures. We'll get into it. So when I talk about personnel, if we have a vacant position, I don't know if that person has a family or a single, so I have to budget conservatively that they'll take the family insurance, for example. These are things when you're creating a budget, you don't know ahead of time, but you got to do it on the conservative side so you're not surprised throughout the year when that employee comes and now you don't have enough money for their family insurance. So there's a process and a reason as to why, and I think the amount of dollars in the surplus matters, not just to say the village had 8 years of surplus, how much surplus did they have? It is very common for that to happen because you set yourself up for that purposely.
And I think that's one area that should be improved. I think we have room for improvement, very big room for improvement there.
Okay, so now we'll jump to the expenditures, high level, personnel. Our Key Biscayne employees, our people, our number one asset are our people, and it accounts for almost 60% of the budget. So when we talk about how do we present a budget, what the numbers are, the reality is most of these numbers are set through collective bargaining agreements for our fire employees, for our police employees. They have 3-year agreements, and that includes their salaries, their benefits, et cetera. The second line, professional and contractual services, these are contracts the village has to perform, for instance, our landscaping, our tree trimming, garbage services, et cetera, where we contract out. And all of these, we've brought a lot of these to council lately because we've gone out to competitive bidding process for all these contracts. So there was a mandate from council, go out to bid, make sure we're getting best value. And I want to be clear on value. Value is not just price. it's service as well. So we have a formula where maybe price is a 25% component of that, and 75% might be the experience of the firm. We do due diligence and call other cities that they've worked for as well, and that's how we score it to make sure we're getting good service, but also for a good price. So I say best value.
Is that including consulting services? Is that including consulting services?
What kind of
Professional
services? Yeah.
No, but these are reoccurring contracts, right? I mean, and so consulting can be a couple things. One, you could have a reoccurring contract with a consultant. Then it would be, yes, we're locked into that contract. We also have money in our operational budget that we can hire consultants to do a very specific project. That would come out of this part of the budget.
Is there any way?
This is an agreement that's already been ratified by the council, right here. So we know that we've got to pay them each year this amount of money. So in reality, and Benjamin's not going to steal his thunder right now, this is our only discretionary part of the budget, right here. 21% of the budget. That's our discretionary part. The other stuff's already been decided.
Is there any way to separate the consulting from all the different categories in professional and operations?
Oh, we have that information, yeah.
Can we have that?
It's in the budget, yes.
No, it's not.
Sure it is. It's in the
No,
budget.
that's what it's not.
Okay.
I want to know exactly how much we spend in consulting.
Okay. I believe it's in there, but let's check. Let's.
I have a question on a specific issue. It says that the police department, which I really respect and hope they got the 7.5% increase. The 733, 282, that's in that budget already, right? Their increase? According to the article, that the police department requested their, a $10.5 million budget.
Yeah, that's already
Yes,
included.
So that's including that. And that's good. We've got a really good civil service and police department, particularly police department. I know I've been a guest a few times. Anyway, on the fire department, their budget went down. But
We know why. Why don't you go ahead and tell them why?
that's pretty good.
Yeah, so a lot of what happened in the fire department had to do with succession planning. We started this department in Village Incorporated in 91, department started in 93. So a lot of those 30-year employees retired, and there was a lot of succession planning to hire our new firefighter employees early so they could shadow those people that are retiring. So last year we did a majority of that succession planning. So there was additional expenditures that hit last year that we're not going to have this year because those new employees have been trained and are
So we
ready to
lost
go.
6
So-
very senior firefighters last year. And we brought in young, fired up firefighters, right? But they're less expensive than the
That's the other
folks
thing.
who've been
So
on board.
succession planning, and also a level 1 firefighter is not the same as a 30-year employee.
Yeah.
So you see
So
some
that's
of
why
that.
you've seen it going down.
Pretty good though.
And then below the line, non-operational, we have our debt service, which is less than 3% of our total budget, and then transfers out a tiny amount. And I just want to clarify, last year there was about $2.8 million transferred out. Right now we're only showing that as $317,000. That $317,000 is the 1% of ad valorem that goes to the land trust. The reason we're not showing anything else is that's sort of the decision making that we're going to present to the council to say these are the initiatives and the capital projects we want to do. Here's the millage rate impact on them, and then we'll be guided on, yes, do we go forward or not. So right now we show it just bare bones, which is just operational. That's what we need. $40.78 million is Village of Key Biscayne's operational bare bones budget. That means no special projects, just to turn on the lights, pay our employees, and do our municipal core services.
And maintain stuff.
And maintain our
Yes.
assets. So here, I think you jumped to the slide about how does that roll up into each department, that $40.78 million, and there it is, our budget is actually presented departmental. So within each department, then you can still drill down further and see is it going to personnel, professional contract services, and Steve mentioned the discretionary part, the operations and maintenance portion as well. So $40.78 million. Here's how it looks as a pie chart per department, and what we call baseline budget, $40.78 million. That's with no capital projects. If we were only to do that with none of the capital projects, our millage rate could be 2.7265. Does anyone know what our millage rate is right now, by any chance?
3.2438.
That's the millage cap set for this year.
3.1245.
I don't have a prize, but yes.
Told you, I'm on the
Yeah.
slow bus, buddy.
You just had to
Three-
read the second number. Nothing slow about that.
So our millage rate is 3.1245. So if we were, if we were only do our baseline budget, we could significantly decrease it even further to 2.7. Now this is something that We talked about other cities. I don't know any other municipality who's going to show you that number and say, hey, we could actually run this place for this low of a millage rate. We're showing it. We're being very transparent. That's what it costs to run this place, 2.7. However, we know.
Amazing pie chart, by the way, a quarter to police, a quarter fire, the two main things that we need. When the bullets start flying, that budget means a lot. Thank you. Come back.
Okay.
All right, so this part of the budget, I mean, we wanted to keep the slides just the same, but normally what we would, oh, you're jumping like crazy. We went back in, we would reiterate the focus areas, and then if you recall back at the beginning, I think you asked Betty, where's Rickenbacker Causeway? It's a subset of, alleviate traffic. So let's jump into the capital plan. And this looks really, really confusing, right? But what's really important is as we started to build a capital plan, remember we talked about is all those different revenue sources, whether internally, transportation fund, building fund, et cetera, or external funding sources, grants, appropriations. So we wanted to identify all the different locations we are getting funding from to add up to our requirement here to the right. So this is the cost of what it is. I know this is really hard to read, but it identifies it from, really hard to read. But basically what's important is what comes out of your general fund, $3.6 million. The rest of this is coming from other people's money down at the bottom.
So where is the roll forward?
Roll forward
Where is the
right
roll
here.
forward fund being housed? And is it captured anywhere else, or is
So
that a new figure that we're seeing now?
That's money
Yeah.
that's already in the CIP
That's
fund.
already in the capital plan.
And it's rolled forward because if you know, a capital fund, not every
So
project fits into a one fiscal year timeline. These are 2, 3, 4 year projects. So that roll forward just means we are anticipating it not to be done by September 30th, 2024, that we're going to roll it into the next year, but it's the same project.
That is another area for improvement.
So that, so you have 8,388,000 in that's another, it's banked. It's almost like a surplus.
No, because those are only against specific projects. It's not just a.
But it's
Sur-
money that's not gonna come out of general fund, and it's not gonna come out of the surplus, and it's not gonna come out of another, it's already existing money.
Some of it did come out of the surplus. So that's $6.2 million that we talked about last year that was a surplus that we went to the council in March. A lot of that's going to be rollover money. Like, I can't see it on here, you guys, if you can read it, good for you. But the St. Agnes Field is in there for $1.7 million.
So then if it's rollover money, had you already allocated some money for St. Agnes that then you decided to use surplus for?
So we came at the end of the year with that surplus. Then we said
Yes.
it's cost 1.7 for St. Agnes Field. The money comes from surplus to our capital fund this year for the project. Now the St. Agnes project's not going to get done by
That's a
2
year and a half,
months.
2-year project.
So now
yeah.
it's in the rollover CIP. It's still committed against St. Agnes Field, but it's going to be done in a future year, not fiscal year 24.
So it's really another bucket of money is what I'm trying to get to.
It's a capital plan.
So for
Yeah.
definition
Yeah.
purposes, rollover is actually money that's already committed.
Yes.
Committed to a
yes,
project, yes.
Yes,
To be spent.
Yes.
Correct.
yes, it's committed, yeah.
So it's not
It's not a reserve, it's committed to a project.
It's off the balance sheet as debt.
Yeah, it's allocated to a project. Very specifically allocated to a project.
Yes.
But some of that money is also allocated to the estimates.
Yes.
Not a full commitment of.
Yeah. I mean, depends on where we are in the project, right? I mean, at the beginning, you have an estimate.
Last year, we budgeted $500,000 for the roundabout in Fairwood, that we didn't know how much it's going to cost, but we allocated $500,000, right?
Yep. Well, actually, no, we
So
transferred.
it's not really money that is committed, it's estimate, some of the money is also estimated to be.
Some of it is, yeah.
So my point there is that's another area for improvement, because we have year after year, we have rollovers of substantial amount of money. Can we schedule the expenses better so that we don't need to collect the money upfront?
Look, we can always do better, right? We can always do better, and I'll never
Okay.
say we can't, right? So.
I'm a bit confused here.
Well, let me answer this question. So, yeah, we can always do better, right? We can always do better. But I want to make sure that major projects, we're doing a number of major projects, don't neatly fit into a fiscal year, right? I mean, they do cross over fiscal years.
But that you can calculate, you can schedule. Every treasury is scheduled
Well, you could try to schedule, right? You could try to schedule. There are other factors that are beyond our control that sometimes don't affect the time.
You have year after year rollovers, that means you can schedule better.
So
Okay.
let's talk about
Yes.
an estimate. So $1.7 million for St. Agnes Field. Do we know to the dollar what that's going to cost? No. When we go out to RFP, we're going to get, let's say, 6 different companies bid on that. Shouldn't we go out? I mean, if one of them offers to do it and has a good reputation and good service, and they offer to do it for 1.5, obviously, I don't want to spend 1.7 just for the sake of being close to the budget, right? We're going to look at all those proposals and pick the one that obviously offers the best value, service, cost, et cetera. So yes, if that project ends up coming back and that vendor can do it for 1.5 and he gets selected, yes, there's going to be a $200,000 surplus. Yes, we will come back and say, do we reallocate it to another project? What do we do with it? So, but at the same time, if you put a number like 1.2 million and you go out to bid and your 5 vendors come back and the number's 1.7, now the project's not going to happen.
No, 5 to 10% is understandable. You have 20% every year. So I understand it, but then you can have a difference of 7%, 10%, but 20% every year, that means you can do much better.
You're doing a cash flow analysis on this when you're doing on projects. And I think what gets confusing is that you're not seeing cash flow analysis.
Each individual project has its own ledger. Yeah, yeah. This is just a roll-up of the project. Yeah.
I'm trying to read, it says there, Beach Park, 700.
Go up there. It's clear up there. It's easier to read up there.
These,
He's going to read over there, Ceci. It's easier to read on that one.
okay, so then what does that mean? That money has been put away to get that section.
So say again. I can't hear you, Ceci. So
Beach Walk, phase 1.
what are you asking?
700.
He wants to know if it was, that money has been allocated and has been put away for that specific
Yes.
project.
Where are you looking? Beach Park. Yeah. Yes.
So that money has been put away
Right.
to get.
And
money
then look, and that's a perfect example that we went through the council a number of times trying to, resize the project. And we were hoping we started a while ago, but then we had problems with our contractor. He couldn't do it at a certain time. He had to push back his timeline, and so here we are. He's going to kick off on September 1st. That project was supposed to start last summer. Perfect example of what Benjamin was just trying to say. So it doesn't neatly fit into a fiscal year.
I propose you give us binoculars on one of the lines for a project, to read that thing.
This is, and have we posted the new one online, or do we still have the one from 25th? All right, so what we'll do is, we still have right online right now, the one from 25th June. We'll put this online tomorrow. And so, yeah. So this will be, this is hard to see, when we recognize that. Yeah. I'm having
This is
trouble.
the
with
same
it.
from June, so.
Yeah, well, this is the one same from Gene, but
already
you'll see
online,
the
yeah.
entire, yeah, yes.
Okay, so you said that you need 40 million to operate, right, the island as it is. And then you have the proposed capital improvements, it's 47. Is it that we need to add 40 plus 47 minus the 30 millions from grant minus the 8, so?
Now, the important thing to
What
look
is
at,
it?
Maria
What is
Eugenia,
it? Okay.
this is the important number to look at,
The-
3.6. And when we get to the next slide, that's where the council gets to choose which ones of these they'd like to fund next year,
In capitals,
right?
okay.
So if you recall, if we
Okay.
went back, remember he said, transfer out?
See?
And it was only like 247 because that had to go to the land trust. And last year it was like 2.8. It's like, wow, that's different. Well, that's because we haven't yet transferred out to capital yet. All right, so the next slide is going to give the council an opportunity to make decisions on all those things we just had on the list. Which ones of these do you want to do?
Okay, because you remember Tony Winton said on his paper that you were looking for $87 million budget, remember? Maybe in March, in May, and we were all,
Yeah,
everybody was in
I never
shock.
understand Tony's math, but
Okay, so
we
everybody
run a
was-
$45 million, $42 to $45 million budget.
That was
so
it, right?
I've never know how I'd like to run an $87 million budget, but we don't have an $87 million
So-
budget.
These taxpayers.
So here's probably the most important slide. If you look at that top line, that was that low millage rate that I said was just bare bones operational budget. We could run this at 2.7265. Then on top of that, we look at some of those capital projects. from the capital plan on the previous slide to say, okay, what are the estimated costs of those projects, and how much does that impact the millage rate? So we start with baseline, do this for 2.7, 265, and then we start adding on. And we've prioritized these to kind of help council into what we think is a priority based on resident feedback, based on the surveys as well. And we piece it together here to say, okay, what's the max millage we want to set for June to give us flexibility to do everything, knowing that as we get closer to September, maybe some of these priority 7s or 6s fall off and we end up with a millage rate that's lower or either equal to last year's or even lower is what we're looking at. So this is probably the most important slide, which we will deal with council and get the priorities.
I mean, the maintenance numbers aren't substantial in the overall budget, but I'm just wondering why maintenance is in capital number, not in the operating budget.
Where you show, which one?
Sorry, Steve, at the bottom where it says 7, maintenance and repair, the two lines from the bottom.
Yeah, well, first, two things I want to say. Anything you see in yellow is not a capital project. These are operational stuff. But this one, you're talking about this one? No, this is a major replacement. So we have certain definitions of what makes it a capital.
And it's still the estimated cost.
Yeah, but when you start talking about $275,000 in HVAC, that's a capital investment for us. Yes, council member.
Yeah, I just had a very quick question, and this goes back to, I think there was a couple of folks that, some folks have requested for a community garden. A community garden. We had spoken about that. There were some folks that had expressed that interest, and I just wanted to kind of touch base with that because I know they wanted it, and I just want to make sure at least that we're taking that into consideration.
It is. It's in the operational budget.
Okay, great.
Yes,
So it goes
is.
into the operational budget, is not going to go into, help me out, help me understand that. It's going into the operational, or it's not part of
No,
this?
it's part of that $40.78 million.
It's already in.
It's already in.
It's already in
Yeah,
there.
so it's not an additional cost. I mean, the council already directed us to put it in the budget.
Yeah.
So it's,
Yeah.
you know, you guys
I
already
just
told us to
remember
do
we
it. So
talked about that,
it's in
and I
there.
didn't see it, so I was asking because,
We do listen.
all right, I know you did. Thank you.
And it's in there, yeah, so it's in the operational budget, so. What you will see different, and I think, Francis, you read it before, 3.2468, whatever it was. If you recall, before we got to, from 7.2 to 10.1, that number is now 3.1. If we were to go, remember, trim max was now at 3.15. So that number's changed. And so what we're going to do is we'll present this. It's changed a little bit over the summer, because you can imagine. We moved forward on some projects. We haven't moved forward on some projects. This will come back. We'll offer up in the budget that he showed you, what we can execute at operation and maintenance. And this is what we present to council at the first budget hearing. They will make the decision of what they want to fund, where they want to cut it. You can see right here, each one of these costs a certain amount of millage, and this is a cumulative. Do they want to go to 3.5? They want to go to 3.08? They can pick and choose. They don't necessarily have to follow our order either, right? I mean, this is their budget to choose. They may want to do this, and they may not want to do that. But then Benjamin and I he'll do it. I'll watch him do it. He'll get out that Excel spreadsheet, make his magic happen, and we'll come up with a millage. We'll ask the council, is this what you want to do? They'll say yes, they'll say no. Or, if it's a first budget hearing, we'd like you to look at this, we'd like you to look at this, come back on September 24th, present this information, then they can make a decision and they finalize the budget.
Are you fully staffed with the fire department and the police department now?
We are right now 2 people short in fire, and
That's what
I think
I'm
we're
asking.
1 short in police.
Okay,
That's a request for 2 additional positions.
I get that.
Yeah.
Just because
Yeah. Yeah, that's an additional request. That's not a.
but we're not fully operational. We don't have full staffing right now.
We're pretty close. We're 1. We're 1 short.
1 and 2, and it's pretty small departments.
Yeah, no, I mean, any little bit hurts, but I mean, if you're close to, if you're at 90% manpower, you're doing pretty good. We do have some injuries, unfortunately. We do have some other things, but in terms of people, I think we're 1 short.
And that's the thing, is a budget policy, we always budget our full, as if it's full personnel for the full year. We want to show you what it would cost. So even though the one might be vacant, that could later contribute to a surplus because we budgeted the full position, not knowing that guy left or retired, et cetera. So that leads into it as well.
Ask this question one more time. It's not a complicated question, it's a simple budget question. The budget meeting. when I balance my budget, I got all these debts, let's say credit cards, and I got all this money in the bank. So when you balance the budget, you know the budget better than me. As a city, debt minus assets, or assets minus debt, however you want to put it, can you just tell me where we are on a net number ballpark? Not just like, are we broke or we got money? Just net balance. Simple question. Budget.
Got money. I think we're the envy of every municipality in Dade County and Broward County. So
But about how much
we're
do
not
we have?
broke.
But how much do we have approximately? No, we don't. That's a budget. We ain't got no $40 million, do we?
Look at our reserves.
All right, is our reserves 40 million?
Let's go back. No, I don't think our reserves
I
are
thought I
20.
saw
Let's go back.
12.
Show
I
them our
thought I saw
reserves.
23.
Yes.
Let's show our reserves. Let's see. One more. There we go.
40%. That shows the number 19
We
and
project
17 and 14.
20.9 at the end of this fiscal year.
How much?
20.9 at the end of this fiscal year.
That's what I'm saying, 20, not 40. Yeah, that's the number.
Yeah.
But then we owe 7, is what you told me. So approximately, that's the ballpark, right? 7 minus that.
A very simple approach, yes.
Yeah.
That's kind of a general idea of, yes, where we're
It's
at.
more-
I'm trying to get a general idea.
It's more complex, sorry to make it more complex, but the village owns this building, for example. So we own assets, we own facilities, we own, so
Okay,
it's,
it's just the ballpark.
Yeah, it's-
We owe
that's-
$7 million, right? And we got 23, or we broke, all right, never mind.
No.
Whatever we got left over, give it to this guy, okay?
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Well,
in cash. In cash.
Cash.
And this is just general fund. Remember, we had those other land trust, stormwater, the capital.
But those are
fund as
rotating
well.
funds. Those rotate in and out through revenues and expenses. So this keep.
Fitch and S&P rating, you know?
For S&P and Moody's, we're one off the highest rating, AA. AAA would be the highest, AA. And the reason we're not AAA is just has to do with our geographical area. I've talked with S&P and Moody's. They will not, no matter how strong our finances are, they will not put us at AAA just
You're on an
because of-
island with one road in, one
We're
road
a
out.
barrier
Well,
island,
thank
one
you.
road
We
in.
know that, but no, they
So
won't.
I think we are the highest we can be, which is AA plus.
But that has a significant impact on what we can borrow. Yeah, you know, the rate at which we can borrow.
You do good at math. The rating,
Well done. All right, so this is the critical thing. We're going to come to, hey, council, we can run the village at this amount. You know, we're going to take on nothing new, but we know residents want new, you want new. You tell us, you know, you've told us which ones of these would you like to do? And then that comes up with the equivalent millage.
I want the wells to be clean.
That's already in.
Does it work?
That's already in the budget. That's not an additional requirement.
For my area, you know, it's, as Lucha said, I think it's,
So you want to?
So here, when we left that June meeting, we were tasked, we had to set and it's by Florida trim laws, a maximum millage rate. So what we did was, we included everything on that initiative list to say, if we did all of that, what would it cost? And at the time, we thought the property values went up by 7.2%. And that's that circled number, that 3.2438. So you all will be receiving a letter from the Miami-Dade County Property Appraiser. I think it's
Within a
by
week.
August 24th, so you're gonna get it within the next 2 weeks. And it's gonna have that maximum millage rate on there. It's gonna show you your taxable value of your house at that millage rate, what you will pay. Now I can tell you from experience with Steve for the last 3 years, how does that maximum millage rate compare to the actual millage rate when we come out of the budget hearings? And every year that we've done this, we've brought it down, and when I did the math, we're down about 4% every single year. So we are committed to doing the very same thing over the summer. What I've done, yesterday we had the property and liability insurance brokers in the office. I'm beating them up on their commissions, we're putting competition. So we're negotiating all summer long to be able to bring the operational expenditures down. On top of that, we have that initiative list that we're gonna work with council to prioritize. We know we're not gonna do everything on that list. We're gonna strike the right balance to say what is really the priority of the council, residents, et cetera, to end up with a millage rate that's gonna be lower than that maximum number. So don't get alarmed when you get that letter. I'm not just telling you it's gonna be lower. Our track record shows that it is. And we're committed to doing the same thing. That's what's going on. That's why I don't take vacation with my family in the summer, is because I'm busy negotiating here in the office in June, July, and August. It's my busiest time of year to make sure that we bring that rate lower.
Just one, Benjamin, and thank you guys for doing this. It was very, very helpful. The one thing that does stand out is our property assessed value did go up 10%. So no matter what, we are going to be taxed more. So sharpen your pencils, because
Go
we
next
are
slide.
paying more taxes.
No, we recognize it. Remember at the beginning.
And that's really the bottom line.
So,
So the millage rate, sometimes it's not about, it's really about the bottom line.
so we understand that, and if you remember, we balanced this budget in June at 7%. So that when it came back as 10,
You've got a windfall.
exactly,
We do.
and we know that's not.
And we recognize that.
We
And
recognize
There's a reason
that,
why
so-
I picked those three numbers
You guys got to remember
and said that you've spent
said it.
increase in taxes 30%.
37% of the house only homestead, the rest is paying the full.
Correct.
So guys, you're getting a lot of money, you know, and there's some people that it's gonna be paying the full amount, so, Steve. It's Steve. Yeah, it's because you always, you know, you push the councils and you say, no, I need this, but it comes from our pockets at the end of the day.
So the interesting
We
thing too,
recognize
is
that.
yes, we look at that. Yes, we go back to your question. Yes, we benchmark against other municipalities. What I found interesting, I've done this, the last 4 or 5 years. We saw other municipalities who actually had much more significant increases. Look at the county, the city of Miami, that had increases 12, 13, 14%, and left their millage rate steady. We've dropped it every single year, and we're committed to doing the same this year. So we do look at that. We do want to drop it as the values go up. So yes, we are looking at that. And yes,
I live in Coral Gables, and they want to raise my taxes. I wrote to my commissioner wrote me a note, one of those Friday things. But
You can't talk about
let me this is funny, and I wrote back to her. She hasn't responded back to me yet. I guarantee you contact any one of our council members, they're going to respond to you. What I'm saying is we've got a very responsive, and we believe we owe you information, and we also owe you the right budget. It's a balance, right, Mario Eugenia? We want to make sure that we don't charge you too much, but at the same time, there's stuff we need to get done, right? Because every day we're asked to get stuff done, and we can't walk away and not get the stuff done. So that's a fine balance that we have to balance each year. And sometimes we get it very close, sometimes not so close.
I just want to say, when you're thinking about the budget and thinking about the millage rate, take in consideration all the condos on the Key have tremendous assessments because of the 40-year, and you've got to think about that with them, because more than half of the village is made up of the condos and their residents.
No, we recognize that, and it's not just it's assessments, it's increase in insurance. There's been an increase to live anywhere in South Florida over the last 3 to 4 years, and we recognize that.
I think using the mileage rate for comparing year after year is the wrong approach. Because the base is so different that it doesn't make any sense to compare mileage from this year to last year. You have already 10% increase in value. So you have to work more on absolute numbers, on total budget that you're spending and in which money which are the expenses that you're having and how to control that. Because again, mileage doesn't show the reality. And on top of that, the increase in the property values is not something you make. It's money that you don't have. The residents don't have that money. The owner doesn't have that money. It's the property appraiser saying your property now is worth more, but you're not making that money. So it's important to work on absolute numbers and total amount of money instead of comparing mileage. I think that's the wrong approach. I think the council should review that or ask you to add total amount of money spent per department, in total, how it's evolving year after year, because no matter how much you reduce the mileage, we keep growing, our total budget keeps growing year after year.
No, we respect that, but the same thing that's making it more expensive for all of us to live is what's also making it expensive to do our operations. Nobody's coming to the village and saying,
It's growing
yeah.
more than the cost of living, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. So there must be a reason for that growth.
And we told you we can do it for, what was it, 40.78, right? And what was last year's budget? What was last year's budget?
The big challenge for you
42.
as an administrator should be how can you improve productivity and reduce costs instead of asking for more money every year. It's like showing us where are the areas you could improve this year compared to last year. How are you making spending less money using technology, using virtual training, things that are really a consideration of improvements. And
So-
I think that is missing from the whole budget
So I want to go back to the process. When we sit with our department directors and we go over the goals and objectives and we lay out what we're going to spend on, our directors are not looking at the taxable values, the millage rate. In fact, they're not even out yet. So we're not even looking at that, and I don't think our public works or our building department or our police officer knows about millage rates and values. We are looking at what it costs to run the department. You know, I heard the comment about the condos and the insurance. Well, when I meet with our insurance brokers on our property values, our workers' comp insurance, we're faced with those same increases. Just because we're a municipality, we're not immune from them. So we're negotiating, we're trying to do the same thing. Our costs have gone up. When we talk about our employees, our police and firefighter employees, labor has gone up, labor's gone up for us as well. The majority of our budget is people. And I'll give this anecdote because it kind of shows my change in mindset. When I negotiated contracts, I've done it, many contract negotiations, when I was in Miami Beach, and I thought, as the village side, we totally won this negotiation. We totally won, we pulled a fast one on fire police, and then we spent the next 3 years losing employees. It was not a win. It cost a lot more to recruit the replacements.
hire and train them.
When we're at the bargaining table now, I take a more balanced approach to say, we gotta pay our people fairly, right? The people is what makes this village. Our firefighter and police are top class. We look at what other municipalities are paying them. At the end of the day, these are people too. If another city's paying more, has better benefits, we're at the risk of losing them. So I'm not saying to pay them well above market rate, but it's something we carefully analyze, each salary, each benefit, when we're at the bargaining table to make it fair for them and fair for us. So maybe we both leave from that table upset, but for the next 3 years that we have that contract, I'm confident that we're gonna keep the existing employees, and if we have to replace them, we're an attractive place that people wanna come to. The reality is we learned a lesson, again this year, is that Key Biscayne is nowhere close to any of our employees. What makes a firefighter or police officer drive and pass 7 other municipalities, 8 other municipalities to get to work in Key Biscayne? You have to keep that in mind when we're at the table negotiating. And those are the numbers that affect the budget. Once we get to putting the numbers in here, those deals are already done. But that's the kind of the thoughtfulness we have to put into that process to understand we need to keep our employees. That's the best thing about Key Biscayne, and how do we do that? Yes, it does cost money. Yes, it does go up every year. We've got to be very mindful of what other cities are paying for them and how we're attracting them to come work here.
But there are other places to kind of sharpen your pencils, and I agree about the employees. But whether it's procurement, whether it's contract services that we're doing, whether it's having performance measures and actually monitoring to see what programs are working, what programs are not working, what's become obsolete, what, you know, whether freebies, what the metrics for freebie, and whether that's you're getting your money's worth. So there's other things. I don't think we're like, oh, you know, we value our employees, and we do, you know, it's cost of living, and we want everyone to live just comfortably.
Agreed.
But I think that I think what we're more concerned about is, are we sweating the details?
Agreed. But personnel 60%, contractuals 20. And you say, all right, we're going out to bid every single one of those contracts. We have a list from high to low, when they're expiring, 90 days out, 120 out, go out to bid, bring in competition. That process is happening continuously, and you can see our council agendas are much longer than they ever were because we're bringing all these contracts back. So yes, we are mindful of that and looking at those.
And I want to make sure that you recognize as we went through it that, you know, I highlighted that 21% of our budget is discretionary. That's it. Just shy of $9 million. Just shy of $9 million. The rest of it is committed to employees or existing contracts. So we're really playing with what do we want to spend that $8.9 million for.
But that makes a difference in the millage, those $9 million. That's.
Oh, yeah.
It does, yeah, it does. But you also don't want to be, what's the saying, a penny wise, pound foolish?
No, you don't.
I mean, let's go ahead and cut $2 million? Well, then what are we not doing, right? So you got to be those margins are pretty small. $8.9 million is not a lot of money, you know. And if you spread it across the entire village, that's about a
minuscule amount of.
Yeah, that's $100 of tax
It's a minuscule
for
amount of
each
the
taxpayer.
operations that we need, though.
Yeah, but that's already committed, though. That's already in an agreement that's set. So, yes, Robert.
If I may, I think with a lot of the different things, you have a great analysis. What has happened over the years? What has the budget won? I think the thing that's, for me, what's missing for me, the largest part of the budget is the staffing, and there's no analysis really about that. like you said, there's benchmarks, there's other municipalities you've talked to, there's also per resident, what is the cost, and this is how it compares nationally. Or I think that if you put some of the analysis like you have in everything else, that would create more of a comfort to understand where we are, what are the benchmarks, and how we compare, because that's a huge part of our budget, is the staffing. So-
Yeah, and it's something we haven't looked at. It's such a challenge, because we look at, let's take policing, for example. We see policing stat, how many police personnel, do you do it per population? Do you do it per area that they're patrolling? There's so many different factors with no two cities being alike, especially looking at Key Biscayne demographics. We mentioned where half the people are in the condo towers. So those are things that we're constantly looking at. It's hard to get an exact number, but we do have best practices for police and fire, how many employees you have per call, per population, per square mileage of area as well, to right size it. And then we get asked to do more, right? The resident survey mentioned traffic. Do we need more police to man traffic? So yes, we are looking at those metrics and trying to right size these departments. Believe me, we don't want firefighters or police officers sitting around doing nothing. We gotta make sure we're right size it.
And to communicate that through the report, I think would be helpful.
Okay, any more questions before we go? Charles?
I have one back to the condo thing. You mentioned briefly that you're anticipating revenues from permit fees of condos going up because of the.
No,
Explain that to me again.
the fees would not go up. We would anticipate once people start doing construction, we would receive those fees, because you have to do your permit fees, your plans reviews.
What construction do you see taking place in the condos next year that's not going on now?
Well, all the folks are going through their recertification process, and they're going to identify requirements. And once they identify requirements, the condo board's going to have to make the decision to move forward on what they need to do to address that. So we track that process. We know every step of the way
I'm just
where they're
thinking
at. And
most
a
of
number
that's-
of people right now are in the permitting process.
Okay, I'm gonna check with permitting, because my
Yeah.
blink is that most of that's been done post-Champlain, post-towers at the Sunny Isles.
Yep.
And the only thing coming up next year is gonna be the SRS reserves kick in 2025, which
Yep.
is actually gonna suppress.
We've got a very detailed, I think it's a 7-step process, maybe an
Yeah,
8-step
yeah.
process that goes through the entire recertification process. And we can tell you what buildings in what step and where they are. And everyone's in the permitting process, which is where they need to be. But the next step is then they got to submit plans for review, which is they submit.
Okay, second part of that question, just out of, I don't know if this is yours. I've been looking at those permit fees, and as contractors want to do, they will, $500,000 job that the condo is paying, and I look it up in the permit fees, and it's $400,000 estimated cost. Who monitors that discrepancy?
Our building department.
Okay,
Yeah.
deal with them. Thank you.
I mean, if you know of something, and if you want to dime them out, go ahead. But we got to go with the documents that we receive. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, we have to trust the profession. If we questioned everyone and said, "Tell me your real numbers," you got to trust what you get, right? So, and 98% of the people are going to give you the right number.
That brings me to my last statement. Thank you for your fine work, seriously. I've been here 50 years, and I know you guys this is a great city to live in. And what you said incrementally, 8 million, whatever, we have great police officers. I know a lot of them, 33 of them. But the last statement I want to make, and it's a joke, based on your comment, what I'm missing from this budget the most is the investigations into corruption. It was a joke.
All right, with that,
Tied in
ladies and
with that.
gentlemen, have a good night.